Hello, Wisdom Café. I am talking today with Carol Christ, the interim executive vice chancellor and provost here at UC Berkeley. Hi, Carol.
Hello.
Thank you for sitting down with me today and talking about your leader story. So you were previously in the role of EVCP here at Berkeley from 1994 to 2000. Then you left campus to become the president of Smith College. And then you returned in 2015 as the director of the Center for Studies in Higher Education. That's an impressive career path. What do you find is the most rewarding and the most challenging aspects of leading in academia and at Berkeley in particular?
I think the most difficult job that I did in my academic career was as department chair. Because as department chair, you have a power often imagined as greater than it is in the eyes of your colleagues. And your colleagues are, in addition to being the group of people that you are leading, your social community. So I've often told people that that was the most difficult job that I did.
Okay. And what about what's the most rewarding of leading in academia?
The most rewarding thing about leading in academia, there are really two things. These institutions to which we give our lives are so great. And feeling that you can contribute to that continuing greatness is really wonderful. It's working with faculty, understanding their research, understanding the worlds they work in that are so different from whatever your own intellectual world is. And it's the students. It's seeing the students at this critical time in their lives between, for most traditional age students, 18 and 22, when they're deciding who they are away from home for what's often the first time. That's really wonderful. It's such a privilege to be able to be with students at that time in their lives.
Is there anything particular that you learned being president of Smith College that you brought back to Berkeley?
There's a great deal that I learned being president of Smith College that I brought back to Berkeley. I never thought that this would be the case. But Berkeley is currently at a moment of very challenging transition between a financial model that has multiple revenue sources, each of which is really discrete in its uses and the process of allocating it, the formula that pertains to its allocation, to a process that's much more an all funds model, an integrative model. And it was being in a private institution working with a very different kind of budgetary financial model that taught me that, and that's what I can bring back to Berkeley.
And you think that there's parts of that private school model that could benefit us in the public sector?
That's right. I want to make sure that you don't misunderstand that I'm recommending privatization for Berkeley. I'm very much opposed to that. But we have to think about our finances more in the way that privates think about their finances. That is an all funds model in which all money is green, and you can determine priorities in the context of your whole budget rather than having distinct and separate funding streams.
Okay, thank you. When you think back over your life and the experiences you've had, what core beliefs have really guided you and choices that you've made?
I believe very strongly in the importance of integrity and honesty. I try always to tell people what I think in all the candor that I have, because I think that that is the most productive way of moving forward. I believe passionately in the value of higher education and in access to higher education.
What does it mean to you to be a leader?
I've always thought that as a leader, what you do is enable others to take initiative in a direction that you determine is strategic for the organization. So I know there's a model of leadership that has often a male figure in front of a sort of army of people striding forward, and that's not at all my sense of leadership. My sense of leadership is thinking very hard about where an organization is at a particular moment in history and trying to determine what are the most important opportunities to grasp that are going to move that organization forward, and then getting enough people to share your vision of what are the important questions, what are the important initiative areas, and then get them to engage with them and own them. That's my sense of leadership.
And in higher education, leaders don't necessarily have authority as their source of power. It's more influence, right? You achieve more by influence. So how do you actually do that in your role here? Try to influence others.
It's very much about telling stories. Stories. I believe that we are a storytelling species. We're a narrative species. And one of the most important things you need to do as a leader is to grasp enough about the history and the identity of an institution, together with where you want to take that institution, to tell a story about it, and then to persuade others to believe that story. The story as a leader that's important is the story of the organization or the institution, and you have to figure out what that story is, and then you have to get other people to share that story so it becomes not my story, but our story.
So you suggested earlier that this is a challenging time for our campus. What is a story you would tell now to inspire confidence in UC Berkeley at this time?
There are several stories that I would tell, just denying what I just said to you. The one is, Berkeley is an enormously complex, flat organization, so that at the same time that many people like me are very focused on the financial crisis that we're undergoing, the work of faculty and the work of students goes on in the extraordinary way that it always has. And that's why we're spending all of the hours and difficult times trying to figure out the budget challenges that we're currently facing. So one story is the story of all of the individual faculty, all of the individual students that are here and learning and discovering every day, and that's just going on. But another story is the transition that I alluded to a little bit before. It's a story of a university, and this is the whole University of California, that worked in a really distributed funding model, now having to think in a much more integrative way about its budget. And understanding what that different financial model, what its implications are for leadership, for the leadership of the deans, for the leadership of the central administration, and trying to figure out not just where are we going to cut the budget, we will certainly do that because we need to do that, but what are our revenue opportunities? In what ways does Berkeley want to grow? We are the first campus of the University of California. We're coming up upon our 150th anniversary in 2018. So what's the Berkeley of the 21st century? How can we even better serve the people of California, the young people of California? How can we provide even more opportunities and even better opportunities to have the kind of education that Berkeley offers? That's the story.
Well, I love your notion of stories, and I think now that you're pointing out this huge milestone we're approaching, stories seem to be a great way to lead us into that, with everybody thinking about their part of the story.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Thank you. What have been the biggest lessons learned for you in your career?
I'll tell a story about Mike Heyman, who was the first chancellor for whom I worked. And we were going down to a fundraising event. It was the very first fundraising event in which I had a role. We were raising money for something for the humanities I thought was very important. And I prepared obsessively for this. I really wanted to do my best because I wanted to raise money for Berkeley. I wanted people to give to this. I was Dean of Humanities, I think, at the time. And so I had prepared my speech, and I gave my little speech. And right afterwards, Mike came up to me, put his arm around me in the way that he had, and he said, "Carol, speak from the heart." And I realized at that moment that I had been too scripted and that I had to learn to speak from the heart. And that's one of the most important lessons that I learned as an administrator. There have been a few others. One is that I learned that you could do things through budget that were much harder to accomplish through policy. Another is that I learned that focusing people on the midterm future is often the most effective way of solving near-term problems because you can put them in a kind of larger context. Another really important lesson I learned was from somebody named Vijay Govindarajam. He's a professor at the Tuck School at Dartmouth. And he says that many leaders make the mistake of focusing all their energy on how to do what is the core activity of their organization even better. And of course you have to do that. But he says that should be just 70% of what you do. The two other things that should take the other 30% are what he called deliberate forgetting. What are the things that you need to forget? Myths, stories, operations, procedures, ways of doing things that are standing in the way of your organization.
Sacred cows.
Sacred cows, exactly. And the other is that you have to constantly be involved in innovation. And innovation is a bit like throwing spaghetti at the wall. Not everything sticks, and you have to have the good sense to say when an experiment hasn't succeeded and say that spaghetti is on the floor, that's fine. And so that's another lesson that I've learned.
Okay, great, thank you. If you were to sit down today with a young new staff member, what advice would you give them as they start their career?
First of all, be interested in everything around you. Use the opportunities you have of being on a university campus to take advantage of the opportunities for learning and understanding what the university does in its larger sense. Everybody has a particular job, and you can, I think, too easily kind of cubbyhole yourself into that particular job without understanding the larger context. For any new staff member beginning her job, this won't be your last job. And so as much as you can learn about the large context of the university, what goes on here, about the organization in its largest sense, that's going to help you have a vision for yourself about what you might do next, and it's going to help you do whatever your job is now better because you're going to understand the context in which it exists.
I think that's great advice. I also think it's challenging to do here because people get very siloed in their role in their department or in their school or college. It's hard to get a sense of that perspective of the whole organization. Do you have any suggestions of how somebody might be able to get that?
Yes. Go to events. Go to informal social gatherings. Just, take opportunities that present themselves that take you out of whatever your silo is. And you will be so surprised with what serendipity offers.
Carol, when your career is complete, what is it you would want people to remember about you?
That she helped the institutions that she was involved with become better.
What are you most proud of and most grateful for?
I'm most grateful for the opportunities that I've had to work at Berkeley and work at Smith. They are both great institutions. I've learned an enormous amount from them. I came back to do this job that I'm doing now because I feel it's time for me to give back, and I love Berkeley. I feel like your work is like your children. You're so happy when you see your kids being successful in ways that you couldn't even imagine for yourself. And so that's how I feel about my institutional work, when I see things just being so wonderful, so great, and think if I had a little bit of a role in pushing that along, that's gratification for me.
Nice. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our staff audience today?
Yes, I want to say thank you for all the hard and creative and imaginative work that you do. You are the ones that are responsible as much as the faculty for Berkeley's greatness.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.